Josh Starr, Superintendent of Schools, Montgomery County, Maryland. Let me give you a little context. I want to ask you a couple questions, and then I'll share with you sort of my big picture thinking about it, and more importantly, I think what we're doing at the local level to try to make some of this happen. So Montgomery County is 154,000 students. We're growing by 2,500 a year. A third of our students receive free and reduced price meals. We're a very diverse district. We are about 22% African American, about 27% Latino. That number is much higher. It's about 30% at kindergarten, first grade. About 14% Asian, 6% multi-ethnic, which is a new federal category, the rest white. About 17% English language learners. So we're growing, we're incredibly diverse. Let me first ask, how many of you are Montgomery County parents? So, all right, a couple. All right. I always have to ask, any Montgomery County graduates? Right, all right, a couple more, thank you. We did okay by you, right? Yeah, always whenever I'm in these rooms, I realize there are people who know much more about the system from their view than I do, and have a lot of historical knowledge. Let me ask another question, which I think is an essential question for us to consider as we're thinking about what accountability means. What's the problem we're trying to solve in American public education today? This is audience participation time. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Yeah. Kids are bored. Yep. Not kids in Montgomery County, but kids are bored. Right. All right, so there you go. Not now. Yeah. What? All right, boredom. Kids aren't engaged. What else? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Career readiness, right? What does that mean? We've been taking a hard look at that, right? Particularly when everything's organized around academics. What else? Yeah. Human development. What does that mean? Yep. Any other? One or two more? Yeah. Yep. All right, making sure we meet the individual needs of every kid, no matter where they are, kids who have needs. Yeah, so those are many of the answers that I get, as well as, the achievement gap. There's so many different ways to answer the question. So the reason I asked that question is because policy follows your definition of the problem, right? And certainly in the accountability world, as long as I've been in it, and I've been in it since '98, the way people think of the problem, right, is how the policies develop. And I would encourage, if you have not read Jal Mehta's book, The Allure of Order, if you want to understand where we are with accountability and understand where we are with school reform and the history of it, The Allure of Order I find to be one of the more compelling books that's come out recently. So I choose to define the problem, amongst all the other things you're sharing, as the democratization of information. Right? So I ask my teachers all the time, if you can Google it, why teach it? It doesn't mean you shouldn't teach it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't teach it. But you have to think, why? If someone can look it up on this. Anybody have the Overdrive app? Right? So I have the Overdrive app. I can get access to any place where I can get a library card. Right? I can get access to any of their books right here. I don't need to buy them. I don't need to go to the library. I can get it right here, or in my other one, because I carry a bunch of them. But information has been completely democratized. We have access to it in all different ways than we used to, and it's fundamentally changed the relationship between the teacher and the child and content. That's the problem, and it means we have kids who are bored. It means we get interrupted all the time because people are using their devices, right? But it means that we have to fundamentally rethink what we're teaching our kids about how to navigate an increasingly complex world. And the role of the teacher has changed in significant ways in the face of that, right? And so the reason I state that up front is because as I think about accountability, particularly in this amazing time of transition where we have a better opportunity than we've had in the last 15 years to reshape what American public education looks like, you have to start with what you want kids to know and be able to do, right? And the focus has been on what happens in the outset, right? What do we test, right? And then what does it mean about school performance and now, of course, individual teacher performance and all that. But when you actually sit down and talk to some of the same policymakers about what do you want kids to, tell me what you want them to do, right? They're not as able to answer that question as they are to say, well, we want them to do well on a test, or we'll raise the bar and say, you know what, we'll make it an AP test, or you have to have this number in SAT. That's fine, but tell me what you want kids to do, because I can actually organize a system around what kids should know and be able to do, and then more importantly, what adults have to know and be able to do to get kids there, right? And that, I think, is the missing piece. I don't believe we have a student learning problem in America today. I believe we have an adult learning problem. And as I've said in Montgomery County multiple times, the accountability for me ultimately must be on the extent to which I am able to organize 22,000 people to be learning all the time about how to get better at the work. It is so hard. I mean, I go into classrooms all the time. I was talking to teachers the other day about, I was talking to a teacher about the Common Core, of course, and all the work we do in that, and math, et cetera, but then they were also showing me how they are assessing the extent to which kids are collaborating, right? And there are more special needs kids in the class and more English language learners. So the teacher not only has to have a higher understanding, a deeper understanding of the content, they have to know how to organize the class to get kids to collaborate and be accountable for that. They have to incorporate, they have to know something about special education. They have to know something about English language acquisition, right? And they have to be held accountable for, and more importantly, supported in being able to manage all that complexity, right? That's a different kind of accountability if you think about it around adult actions, in addition to the outcomes we expect. The tragedy of the last few years, I think, has been how we have, how the accountability conversation has been about shaming and blaming and bashing people. As superintendent of schools, my job is to motivate people and inspire them to try to do better work at a higher level. Right, that's what I have to do, and I can, I got to put pressure under people. I did that just a couple hours ago at my administrators meeting kickoff. But I also have to. I've never met a CEO of an organization who, doesn't see as their job to inspire people to do new work and how to learn how to do new things. And it's tragic that the way that our accountability conversation has been framed these days is not about that. It's about shaming and blaming. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do. And in your packets. You have our strategic planning framework. And I should also say, as a side note, I should have said this in the beginning, I'm also co-chair of Large County School District Consortium, which is a group of, 16 districts in the country that look like Montgomery County. Fairfax, Gwinnett County, Beaverton, Oregon, Wake Forest. And we've come together over the last couple of years to say, wait a second, there's no actually natural gathering place for us. We're not urban, we're not small, but we have more kids. I always tell people I have more poor kids in Montgomery County than DC has kids in their traditional public schools, right? I have more poor kids than Atlanta or San Francisco has in their population, yet people don't think of us that way. And so we've come together as like-minded superintendents and systems that have had some success and have created some positions, papers that we are trying to move through various political realms to influence the conversation. So and I'm not going to walk you through this entire thing, but what we tried to do is boil down what we expect from into one page. Actually, I wanted one page. My deputy said, how about one sheet of paper? So it's one sheet of paper. And we're focused on three things, right? Academics. We've got to be accountable for outcomes. We must. I don't shirk that at all. And it's got to go beyond. And then creative problem solving and social emotional well-being, right? And what we did here for the first time is state clearly what we expect students to do, describe what you want students to do, and then you got to create accountability around the task, because as Richard Elmore says, task predicts performance, right? So you have to actually look at, are we creating a task that reflects this? And then we have specifically what the adults are expected to do, right? And that's new for us. So now we go in and we look. This is the expectation. It's then reflected in our professional growth system, which is our teacher evaluation system, and they have to follow along with it. What we don't dictate, though, is how each school community gets there, right? That's where you put great leaders in place. And it's interesting as we talk about accountability in this country now, we're not talking about leadership enough. What's the accountability for the principal? What's the accountability for the superintendent? What's the accountability for the school board, for the funding agencies, for the mayor, or in our case, county council? The other piece of it you look on the insert, is our school support improvement framework. So we have 4 different areas that we focus on, right, that you're accountable for, and I talk about creating conditions for success. So outcome data is important, whether it's test scores, whether it's attendance, whatever, that's clearly important. Perceptual data is important. We use the Gallup Q12 survey. How do people feel about working in your school? Are they engaged? We know from all the research, we know from all the experience out there, when a faculty is highly engaged in a school, good things happen for kids, right? We need to be accountable for that. How does the community feel about school? How do the kids feel about their level of engagement? The third is implementation, so are you implementing what you're supposed to implement, whether it's new curriculum, whether it's professional learning communities, your school improvement plan. You have to have a thorough school improvement plan. It's got to focus on individual needs of kids. You got to implement it. And then the final one, the fourth is leadership. Right? Are you leading for equity? Are you leading for learning? Right? Have you created opportunities for people for kids to take advanced courses if they haven't traditionally been put in, et cetera. So we look at all of those. And then finally, and then I'll turn it over to Pedro. If you look at the other insert, we have 5 accountability milestones. 3rd grade reading, 5th and 8th grade success, meaning are you reading, mathematics, and well-being, hope, engagement, and well-being, and we measure hope, engagement, and well-being. Because the idea is, are you ready for the next level? When you leave 5th grade, the elementary school has to be accountable for getting kids ready for middle school getting ready for high school, and high school for the next level. 9th grade success, because we know the relationship between 9th grade and future outcomes, and then graduating college and career ready. The rest of the stuff in the middle, meaning the sub-indicators you look at, whether it's kindergarten reading assessments, whether it's your 10th grade scores, your 7th grade scores, that's what school communities need to be able to do to say, okay, wait a second, who do I need to focus my attention on? Right? But they're not accountable every year. They're accountable for those milestones. So we're trying to shift what we emphasize. I will say it's really easy for me to say it. It's really hard for a school to internalize it, particularly when the Washington Post or others, publish the annual rankings, and it's just hard for people to get over that kind of mentality, but we're really trying to push on that. I'll end on this. The other thing is, I guess the 3 things that I'm thinking at the national level we really should be focused on are, first, absolute clarity on what kids should know and be able to do. Right? And I think the Common Core gets us closer, but let's really talk about what do you want to see a child do. 184 days a year, 6.5 hours a day, or 180 days, whatever it may be. 2, test once per level and use the same methodologies that they use in PISA and NAEP to beat the crap out of us, excuse my language, to beat us up all the time, right? And I've talked to some senators and others about, the international comparisons that you use, let's use that same sampling methodology for us and use it for school performance, because the school is the unit of change. Right? The school is a unit of change. Fewer years of testing. And then the third is, and this is more at the broader level, we have to start looking at some big data concepts and looking at how to take all that we know about students and match it with other data that exists in communities so we can provide wraparound services for kids from the time they are born. The data exists. The resources exist. It's about aligning them, and I think the federal government actually has to get into the business of incentivizing us to do that, because we have some we're about to launch our early warning indicator system that's going to enable us to do that, but the government can actually really help us do that in some powerful ways. I don't want them to take our data necessarily. We have rules around that, but to create the systems so that communities can match all that together and say, here's where the pockets are, and here are the other people involved in kids' lives, right? That could be done a lot more easily than people think. It's just there's no money behind it. So that's what we're trying to do in Montgomery County and further. Thank you.